Today I'm going to talk about how to keep your violin pegs from slipping. It's a pretty common problem, and most beginners need help dealing with this problem. They need to understand how to tell the difference between if there's a problem with the fiddle or if they just need to know how to fix the problem. There are a number of things that can cause the pegs to slip, and I'm going to try to go through a couple of different causes and some remedies so that hopefully you can have a happy experience. The first thing you want to check for, and I have a fiddle here that doesn't have any strings on it, but you can still check it either way, even if you have strings on your fiddle, which if you're trying to tune it, you will. And what I do is I just brought down an old fiddle that we have here for repair, and I found an old peg with it. And what we're going to do is, if you'll notice here, with the peg pushed all the way in, this is as far as it'll go into the peg head. Notice how it wiggles. And you can see that. That means that that peg is not properly fitted. A properly fitted peg is going to fit on both sides of the peg box. So a peg like this is not one that you want to push into the peg head any farther, because by forcing it into the peg head, it's getting uneven pressure on the peg head, and so this side of the peg head is likely to crack, and you're not going to be able to keep the peg from slipping very well because it's only grabbing on the one side. So if you're having this problem, you're going to have a new set of pegs fit to the fiddle. The next most common reason that you would have slippage on a peg would be due to the humidity. Violin pegs, it's wood on wood. You have either ebony or some type of dyed hardwood that's in the maple on the fiddle neck. And at least that would be your most common combination. And what happens is, as the air dries out, then the wood shrinks a little bit, and so then the peg wants to slip. If you have a good, properly fitted peg, then this can happen, and you may need to just push harder when you put the peg in. So for instance, right now I have a good peg. It's fitted properly. Notice that when I try to wiggle it, the only thing that's wiggling is my finger. The peg is really sturdy and steady there. But then when I try to tune it up, notice how when I let go of it, it comes back down again. And so what I need to do to make that string fit in there better is push it into the peg head and then turn it up. And then it stays that time. And I may need to push it, depending upon how dry it is and how hard the wood I have is. Then if you don't have an ebony peg, you may not have to push it as hard, because it might be a little softer. If you have a hard ebony peg or an older fiddle, then that wood's going to be harder, and you may have to push it a little harder to get it to stay in. If you're still having a problem with it slipping, there's a couple of things that you need to look at, and I'm going to post some still pictures here. Take a look at the first picture, and you'll notice how all of the strings go directly from the peg to the nut slot on the fiddle. There's a very straight order there. And now take a look at the second picture, and what I've done is I've rewound the G string, and if you notice, it's at a real sharp angle from the peg to the nut. And if you have that sharp angle there, that's going to keep wanting to pull the peg out of the fiddle, because all the pressure and tension is that direction. And so you're going to have a problem with keeping that peg in the fiddle. So make sure that you have the strings all wound up in order and that it goes directly from the peg to that slot in the nut. Now the next thing you want to do, let's say everything is wound correctly, your peg fits real well, and you're still having a problem with it slipping. You've pushed it in, you can't seem to get it to stay in. Then you might want to go with peg drops or peg compound. And both of these work really well. I recommend peg drops generally because you don't have to remove the fiddle peg or the violin peg to make it work. And what you do is, I've got a little bottle of peg drops here, and this will last you pretty much forever. And what you're going to do is you're going to take it and you're going to put it on the peg right next to where it goes into the hole. And just going to put like one drop there and let it soak into the hole. If you're not sure that it's getting in there really well, what you can do is loosen the peg a little bit and then just turn it a couple of times and work it in there. If you have a real stubborn peg, you can put one drop here, and then you can also put one drop on the opposite side of the peg. I would try just the one drop first. Although this stuff is not glue, it can work like glue if you use too much of it, or if you don't use it, if you use it when you don't need it. So make sure that you use it sparingly. And what that does is it helps it makes the peg swell just a little bit, and that's going to make it stay in the slot better. It works immediately, so you don't have to wait for it to dry. You should be able to tune it up right away. The next thing that you can use is you can use what's called a peg compound. I have Hyder paste here, and it comes in a little tin. And with this, you actually have to remove the peg from the fiddle. So I'm going to get my other one out here that I had earlier. And with this one, you would have to actually take the string off the peg, because you would need to be able to remove the peg, or you would at least have to be able to take it out of the peg head far enough to do it. And what you're supposed to do is take the peg compound, and wherever it hits the peg box, what you want to do is put this compound on it just like this, and then put that back into the peg head, and then put the string back on. The Hyder paste also works real well if you're a classical player and you don't use fine tuners. So if you're one of the people who does all your tuning from the top and you don't use your fine tuners down here, the Hyder paste helps to make a real smooth turning peg so that it doesn't do any jumps as you're starting to tune it. So that can work real well for that. Hopefully these things will help you keep your instrument pegs from slipping. One other thing that you can do is try to keep the environment that your fiddle is in humidity controlled. And they do make various little things that you can put in the fiddle that help control the humidity. One of the things that you can use is one of these little humidifiers here. I call them snake humidifiers. And basically what it is, it's a little rubber hose, and if you notice it's got holes along in it. And on the inside of this is a little cotton wick, and what you're going to do is you're going to take this and get it wet, and then you're going to wipe off the outside so that the water isn't dripping off of it. When you're not using your fiddle, what you're going to do is you're going to stick it in the F-hole of your fiddle, and it won't go all the way in because it's got that little black place right there, that little black rubber pad, and that's going to keep it from going all the way in. When you get ready to play your instrument, then you can take it back out again, and it comes right out, and then you should be able to help keep your instrument humidified. That's also good for the wood in the instrument, which is going to help prevent cracks if you live in a dry, humid, a dry environment. And so these are some things that would help. They also make different types of humidifiers, one that can just go in the case, and I've heard of people making their own by taking like a small plastic container, like a film container. You could put a little sponge in there and wet the sponge down, make sure it's not dripping wet, poke some holes in the film container, put that in the case with the fiddle. That can also help humidify the instrument. Typically you want your humidity to be between 40 and 60%. Higher than that's not going to hurt the instrument, but lower than that, you're going to really have a problem with things slipping and pegs slipping, and you may even if it's within that normal humidity range. I hope that helps and that you'll have happy fiddling.